he was born, and he set up a manufacturing plant for COVID vaccines. And that's the way I think that we have to think about the future. It's not always, yes, right now, because we're in a pandemic, we need to export the vaccines. But the more important point is for African nations to have their own capacity to develop vaccines, and we need to share the technology. When you're talking about life and death, we can't be so parochial. We have to understand that this is an international issue. And so I'm looking forward to us moving and developing, and I'm hoping that the manufacturing plant that Dr. Patrick Sunshun is developing in South Africa can be replicated in many different countries. Well, Africa's, initiatives like Kenya's Vision 2030 that works toward democratization, industrialization, and sustainable practices, which aims to uplift the people along with the rest of the economy, I think is, again, just another example of Kenya's outstanding leadership. Kenya's economic projection for 2021 exceeded your own government's expectations, which I think is a really big deal considering the environment of COVID. And my office and the Biden administration are committed to strengthening our bilateral relations with African countries, and we'll continue to show our support through diplomatic relations and legislation. I look forward to the discussion this evening as we hear more from the Deputy President and experts from U.S. institutions. And once again, want to thank the Carnegie Endowment and Georgetown University for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass, for those insights, for your perspectives on a wide range of issues, from Ukraine to Kenya's role in East Africa, to the need for trade, intra-African trade, thinking about what comes after AGOA and young people, YALI, and all of those important initiatives. We'll now have a more expanded conversation on governance, on democracy, on economic development in Kenya and abroad. And I would like to begin by inviting Deputy President RUTO to have a seat at the podium. And then I would also like to invite my very good friend, Professor Ken Opalo, from Georgetown University, who will be leading this conversation. Ken Opalo, I'm sure a lot of you know him, is an assistant professor at the Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. His research expertise includes legislative development, the politics of service provision, under decentralized government, education reforms, and emerging democracies. He is widely published, including in journals such as World Development, Journal of Democracy, and a couple of others. So, Ken, over to you, and I'll be joining you as well.
Welcome, everyone, and to you, Honored Deputy President. So we intend to have a free-flowing conversation, and Zainab and I will pose questions, and at the end we'll open it up to the audience to pose questions as well. I'll begin with a structural question on the Kenyan economy. So, as you said, this August election will be a pivotal election in many ways, and one of the ways in which it will be pivotal is the salience of economic issues in Kenya, especially when we think about the youth, when we think about agriculture, and the need to restructure the Kenyan economy. That said, previously or up until now, the approach has been big infrastructure investments as a way of promoting growth. Do you think that beyond August, there will be political will to restructure the economy to address the imbalances that exist today? Whether we're thinking about demands from the county governments with increasing the devolution allocation share, or we're thinking about interest groups that influence the treasury, thinking about parliament, and the whole budget process. is there appetite to reform Kenya's public finance management to address the challenges that are central to this year's election?
Thank you very much, Ken. I think restructuring the Kenyan economy is an imperative. It's not an option from where I sit. It is a necessary imperative because where we stand today, we have a huge youth bulge that unless and until it's addressed, it poses a great danger to the country. We have debt that needs to be addressed. We have, as you have said correctly, our investment as a government in our first term was on the hardware, so to speak. That's why we went big on infrastructure, on the rail, and did 700 kilometers of new tarmac, of new rail. On roads, that's why we did 10,000 kilometers of new paved road. On electricity generation and distribution, that's why we went from 2 million people to 8.5 million people connected to electricity. But to a great extent, that was the hardware. The software is what we must address as an existential imperative. And it's not a question of whether there will be appetite. It is, as I have said, an imperative. And that is why this election is an election like no other. This election is a transition election. Transition from the fact that we will have an incumbent president handing over to a new president. Transition because it is transiting into completing our democratization process, and transition because the paradigms are shifting. So investing in deliberate creation of jobs for young people is the next frontier. Investing in agriculture so that we can increase the productivity of our farmers, whether it's milk, whether it's coffee, whether it is tea and horticulture. And just to put it into perspective, that's why we were in Nebraska. And the discussion in Nebraska in the US was about value addition and agro-processing, because that's the new space, irrigation agriculture. That's the new space. We were discussing with companies who are already providing that service in Kenya. And so that whole space of dealing with the 4 million young people who are out of school and college and university, ensuring that increasing the productivity of our farmers, making sure that we are providing the correct seeds, we are making sure that there is fertilizer that can inform the productivity of our farmers, making sure that our dairy productivity is enhanced. That's the space. And much more importantly, making sure that the 10 million odd micro, small, and medium enterprise space is stimulated through access to credit, access to infrastructure, and making sure that there is legislation that protects these small enterprises, startups, and making sure that they can move up the ladder. And at the bottom of all that is making sure that we manage our resources and we contract debt at rates that we can afford, and making sure that to be able to deal with the challenge of debt, expanding the tax base by creating more jobs, creating more viable enterprise, increasing the productivity of our farmers, engaging in value addition, agro-processing, the whole array up to manufacturing. So the structural adjustment of our economy is an imperative, so to speak.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm told that Congresswoman Bass might be jumping. So I'll raise ahead to foreign policy question to catch up before we continue with the more Kenya-focused discussion. So my next question, Kenya is, I've been saying, an important global player in the region. Kenya is a strong in terms of China's effort with the Belt and Road Initiative. China has financed many of the infrastructure projects in Kenya. At the same time, the U.S. is also a major partner in terms of foreign relations with the Kenyan government on trade, on security, and other areas. How do you see the relationship with both powers evolving in the medium and long term after August and beyond?
We have already recognizing the importance of, first of all, let me say, the relationship with our partners globally is even and balanced. It's guided by our Kenyan interests in whatever engagements that we are engaged in. The U.S. does not conflict in any way with our relationship with the other countries. That's why recognizing the importance of the U.S., United States partnership, in 2018, that relationship has now been elevated to a strategic relationship, recognizing the importance of the U.S. and the role they play in our economy. This morning, I had a 3.5-hour engagement with the State Department with my team because that relationship is that much important. And we have agreed on a couple of areas that will inform the future, whether it is from fighting terrorism, economic development, and how we need to reorganize ourselves around the defense relations, ensuring that the safety and security of people. The entire space, including universal health coverage or public health. So our relationship with the U.S. is robust, it is strategic, and for your information, the many areas that are of focus to us going forward, whether it is investment in labor-intensive infrastructure development, like housing. We have partners already concluding discussions from the U.S. that they will support our job creation infrastructure initiatives. We have a robust engagement with the U.S. on the single most important item in public health, universal health coverage. In fact, it's among the 5 top strategic areas that we are building a relationship with the United States. So we do not think we can say it is the U.S. versus any other country. The U.S. have a special place in the relationship with Kenya.
Let me quickly come in and bring in Congresswoman Bass. I'm sure you have comments and remarks before you have to step away.
Yes, yes. And let me say that I appreciate the Deputy President talking about the special relationship between the United States and Kenya. And then in terms of the United States, of course, you know, the African American population, because we do not know our history in terms of where we come from in Africa. We know that our ancestors were from the continent, but we don't know from where. So we kind of have this tradition in the African American community of we claim the entire continent of Africa. And so it's extra special, not just the US as a whole, but especially as a Black American, and I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that often comes up in Congress is raising concerns about China's role in Africa. And I certainly know that, you know, it is a mixed bag. But whenever that comes up, I always emphasize the United States needs to step up more. If we're critical of what another country is doing, then why don't we step in and do what it is that they're doing? So that is my focus and my emphasis. To what the Deputy President was saying earlier, I am working on legislation on education. When he made reference to the youth bulge, I know that is absolutely an issue continent-wide. And one thing that I would love to hear from the Deputy President as this goes on, I do have to jump, but my staff is paying close attention, is what we could do. We're working on legislation now to help strengthen educational opportunities in many countries, but obviously my focus and emphasis is going to be on the continent. And if there are suggestions or ways that the Deputy President thinks that we could be helpful there, or in strengthening the trade agreement between the nations in Africa, we would be very interested in knowing, always wanting to improve the role that the United States plays on the continent. And then finally, let me just say to the Deputy President that I wish him well. I know he is up for election, and both of us are actually running for election right now as I'm running to be the next mayor of my city. And so I know the stress that he is under. I share that, and I wish him all the luck in the world for success and for a peaceful transition. Thank you very much.
Maybe it is important for me to ask Congresswoman Bass to wish her all the best as she runs for mayor, and I need all the luck you have mentioned. And
thank you. I'm sure you'll do fine.
And we look forward to making a contribution to humanity and making sure that we have a better world to live in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here with us.
And maybe I should just mention on one thing that she talked about education. It's instructive that as we deal with a huge youth bulge, at the center of making these young people candidates for decent jobs, at the heart of it is training. When we came into office about 9 years ago, the training, especially in our TVETs, in technical and vocational institutions, we had roughly about 90,000 and an enrollment of 90,000 students. Today, we have moved those numbers from 90,000 to 500,000 enrollment. We have built 170 technical training colleges, again to improve access to training, access to skills, access to competence that makes these young people a lot more viable candidates for work. And that's really what she can do in her capacity, pushing the horizon and making sure that education goes all the way to equipping young people with skills and competences so that it makes them a lot more employable and easy to engage.
Great, and her members of her staff are here, so I'm sure we're going to have fruitful conversations after this main event. I wanted to come back on the point about elections, and I think it's kind of an issue that we're all dancing around. You are one of the leading contenders in the upcoming presidential election in Kenya in August. What would you say makes you a compelling candidate to the Kenyan people? But also, very importantly, you know, the truth is there are some people who have some concerns about, you know, whether it's issues around integrity or incidents in the past. So how would you respond to those concerns that people have? And some of them are quite they're quite valid. So how would you respond to those concerns that they have?
First and foremost, I'm a candidate in this. As you have put it correctly, I am not just a candidate. I am probably the leading candidate in this election. And it's not by default. It is because I have a track record that the people of Kenya know, they feel, and they associate with. And secondly, my team and I have a credible plan that is resonating with the people of Kenya. When you are in that pivotal position, you do not miss people who will say things about you. And that's the nature of politics, right? So we are very clear, and I am acutely focused on making sure that the plan we have, and it's a plan around taking Kenya from where we are today to the next level. And our plan, we've dubbed it the bottom-up economic plan. That involves investments that would create jobs. And we are very clear these are targeted investments to create jobs and opportunity for young people. The second item is investments in agriculture, value addition, agro-processing, value addition, not just to create jobs, additional jobs, but to put money in the majority of people at the bottom of the pyramid. And our investment in that area will not only give us the returns we are looking for, but those returns will be within 2-3 years. That way we can expand the tax base and begin to tackle the challenge of debt. Our approach is to ensure that the micro, small, and medium enterprises that comprise 80% of all business in Kenya is addressed in 3 ways, in 3 fundamental ways. Create the necessary infrastructure for them to thrive, create a legal regime to protect their business, and much more importantly, put in place financial systems that protects these enterprises from predatory lenders. You may want to know that while big corporates access credit at plus or minus 10%, micro, small, and medium enterprises access credit at not 10%, but anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000%. That is the discrepancy, and that's what is destroying opportunity, taking away opportunity from millions of citizens that are in the micro, medium, and small enterprise space. We intend to sort out that structural problem. And maybe just for the record, 15 million Kenyans today are blacklisted on CRB, on Credit Reference Bureau. That is half the working population of Kenya. And that tells you the toll that predatory lenders have taken on the people of Kenya. It is a matter of urgency. And that's why when I told you sorting out our economic situation is an imperative. It's not an option that we are looking at. And that plan also includes making sure that everybody carries a proportionate burden of health insurance. Today, the people at the bottom of the pyramid pay as much as 10% for health insurance. William Ruto, Deputy President, pays 0.8 zeros before 1%. So that's the discrepancy. That's the inequality. That's what we must sort out. And as a result, we have a huge population that have been locked out. So our approach is to lower the costs for the people at the bottom of the pyramid and get people like myself and others to pay their rightful share. That health insurance is going to be graduated and based on everybody's income as opposed to giving static figures. So sorting out that space creates the bottom-up effect on everybody. Getting the jobless into jobs, getting the people who are paying high credit, access to credit, getting our farmers' productivity up, getting those who have no access to health to have access to health. And we believe with this plan, we can take the country forward. Let me speak to the last item that you have mentioned on integrity. Integrity is an important subject in this election. Accountability, the fight against corruption, is a very important subject in this election. And speaking about integrity, our position and my personal position is that we must have an accountable government. We must have accountable public officials. And that accountability must be built around institutions. It's not for me to decide that Ken is corrupt or Zainab is corrupt. Institutions. The moment it is subjective, the moment it is personalized, then it runs the risk, as it has done in Kenya, of being used as a political tool against your competitors. It must be on the basis of institutions, and that's why our approach is, number one, immediately we come into office, we will operationalize the judicial fund. Operationalizing the judicial fund, which is in the Constitution, but has deliberately not been operationalized because there are people who want to continue to use the war against corruption as a political tool against their opponents. That's why they do not want to operationalize the constitutional institutions that would actually do the fight against corruption effectively. So operationalizing the judicial fund will do three things. Number one, it will give the resources to the judiciary to hire the men and women who can then prosecute cases. Number two, it will give them the opportunity to build the software and the training of those people. And number three, it would make it that much more easy to determine cases within the shortest time possible. For your information, it takes anywhere between 10 and 15 years to prosecute one case, one corruption case. That's why I think it's correct for people to say justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. The second item, which we will operationalize immediately, is to make sure that the criminal justice organs, including the Inspector General of Police that carries out investigations, the Director of Criminal Investigations Department, and all those other institutions have not only constitutional independence as it is, but they also have operational and financial independence. Today, all investigations, criminal investigations, investigations of corruption are carried out by institutions that depend on the office of the president to give them the money. The law provides that these institutions should have their own financial independence, complete with accounting officers and their own money, that they don't have to depend on the office of the president or indeed any other office to prosecute matters corruption. And the third issue for us is to make sure there is no budgeted corruption. Today, you have close to 100 billion Kenya shillings budgeted every year that has no oversight in opaque institutions. And that amount has grown fivefold, between 4 and 5-fold in the last 10 years. And where you have accountability problems, where you have oversight challenges, the more money you put in opaque institutions, the greater the corruption in there. It is our position that we should get away and make sure that every coin is accounted for. Lastly, and this is the reason why some of us were said to be against the handshake, The handshake took away the oversight role of the opposition. In Kenya today, we do not have an opposition. There is a mongrel of an organization. Nobody knows what the hell it is. People don't know whether we have the opposition in government or the government in the opposition. It's quite a maybe scientists, maybe policymakers in this great institution in Carnegie could do research on what is going on in Kenya. Because for all intents and purposes, the opposition is running government and government is running the opposition, which is quite a situation.
By handshake, you mean the alliance? For those of us
yeah.
who...
The alliance between what was supposed to be the governing party and the opposition party that ended up in a situation where the whole of that arrangement actually did 4 fundamental things. Number one, because of that conundrum where government decided to work with the opposition and the opposition decided to become part of government, committees that are supposed to be chaired by government are chaired by the opposition, and that kind of thing. What happened? We lost the opposition, we lost the governing party, we lost the government agenda, and we ended up, all of us, as losers, because we lost almost 4 years chasing a mirage, that did not really work. Where does it leave us now? It leaves us now, the supposed opposition leader has become a puppet of government, and the leader of the ruling party is now a refugee in the opposition. So it's quite a situation.
I'm going to open it up to Q&A. And just raise your hand and I'll point to you. So we have one hand over here.
thank you to Zainab, and thank you to Zainab and the Carnegie Endowment for this great session. So I have a quick question, and my question is, you've talked a lot about this bottom-up agenda, but a lot of what I hear you saying is very similar to Kenyatta's Big Four, right? You're talking about the ordinary Kenyan, improving access to healthcare, agricultural extension services, health insurance. I mean, we know Big Four agenda was food security, affordable housing, universal healthcare, job creation. So what exactly makes your bottom-up agenda different from either what we've seen over the last 9 years or what the other opposition candidate, well, previously opposition candidate, Raila Odinga, would do, right? What exactly, can you just kind of flesh it out for us? What exactly would be different in your policy? Thank you.
Can you also introduce yourselves when asking the questions, please, and make the questions brief because we are running out of time.
My name is Amaka, and I run the Africa practice at a global political risk advisory firm called Eurasia Group.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Your Excellency, we'll take a few questions.
Okay.
How are you, Your Excellency? My name is John Tomaszewski. I'm senior professional staffer working on Africa at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And we've been watching with great attention the work that Kenya has been doing at a regional level in the Horn, East Africa, on peace and security issues. And I'd like to hear a little bit about your views, whether it be Somalia, Ethiopia, Uganda, East Africa community, just how you see yourself, should you be elected president, playing a role in that space. Clearly, American foreign policy is shifting very hard towards depending on Kenya, looking towards Kenya, not only as a peacemaker, but as a security partner anyway. So I'd love to get your perspective on that.
So we'll take those two questions. And Your Excellency, on the second question, I'd also like to speak to the impending inclusion of the DRC into the East African community, what it means for Kenya.
Thank you. I quite agree with Madam Ivanga. I quite agree with her that there could be some similarity between described and the Big Four. And that's not by default. We had a great plan called the Big Four. Unfortunately, we never got the time to implement it. It didn't work. And it didn't work because we got friends. We got friends who came and joined. Okay. I'm saying we had a great plan. In fact, if you have a bit of the history, if you have a bit of history, in our first term, we decided that we were going to invest. Let me try this one. I was saying, if you have a bit of history, in our first term, we deliberately decided to go heavy on infrastructure by way of laying a foundation that would then help us do our second term. That's why we invested close to 350 billion Kenya shillings on a standard gauge railway, 700 kilometers, 10,000 kilometers of tarmac, electricity generation and distribution, and building a whole stage of training using our technical training colleges. Unfortunately, fortunately that went very well, and we did a fantastic job, and we won our second term resoundingly because of that of that effort. We developed the Big Four plan. And this was supposed to be our second term agenda. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because from where I sit, I am now beginning to look at it as though it was deliberate. It was actually sabotaged. Because when we got involved in this story of the handshake, the coming together of the opposition leader and the president, priorities changed. There was no more Big Four. The focus on creating jobs for young people went down the drain. The focus on universal health coverage went down the drain. The focus on manufacturing did not happen. The focus on agriculture went up in smoke. So we got new priorities, and the new priorities were how we are going to change the Constitution. So we got involved in another conundrum called the BBI, called Building Bridges Initiative. It never built no bridge. It broke so many bridges. And we ended up in a mess. Because for 4 years of our term, we were involved in this exercise, trying to change the Constitution unconstitutionally, trying to reverse all the gains we had made in our progressive Constitution, trying to recreate an imperial president that had taken us 30 years to fight. Thank God that the judiciary stopped that whole charade, and it ended up at a place called null and void in the judiciary. There's been a concerted attempt to resuscitate this BBI monster. And there is even a pledge by our competitors that if they ever get anywhere near office, they will bring it back. I do not know how an imperial president is good for any country. I do not know how a compromised judiciary that has a supervisor appointed by the executive is good for any country in the globe, let alone Kenya. And I do not know how a compromised legislature can provide oversight over the executive. I mean, it's really tragic that that's the position where we are. So to answer your question directly, we never got opportunity to do some of the very good ideas that were in our plan for second term. And as a person who had participated in crafting those beautiful initiatives, it's only fair that given an opportunity, I would begin there and now take it up to the next level. And maybe to respond to my good brother, we are looking forward to the Democratic Republic of Congo joining the EAC. Democratic Republic of Congo is a very important partner with a 90 million population. We share a lot in common with DRC. They use our Mombasa port as an outlet. We have a lot of business already that goes on between DRC and the rest of the member states of the EAC. You may want to know that the EAC, the intra-trade in the EAC is close to 20%. In fact, it's the most progressive trading bloc in the African continent. And therefore, DRC would be leveraging on on that progress that has been made. And as we look at it, the EAC will actually be the trailblazer for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. You can easily build on the successes of the EAC and build them into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And I see, from where I sit, Kenya playing a very pivotal role. And for Kenya to play that pivotal role, I was sharing with the Assistant Secretary of State this morning, you need a Kenya that is stable and democratic. If you have a country, an anchor country like Kenya, that is not stable, it cannot play the anchor role. It cannot play the leadership role. And in my very honest opinion, the way to stabilize Kenya is to make sure that it is democratic and it is prosperous. That's how you create a stable country. And democracy is on the ballot in this election. Inclusivity is on the ballot in this election. The stability of Kenya is on the ballot in this election, in the sum total of it. So that's why this election is very important. And to give you my assurance that I see Kenya playing a very important role in Somalia, in South Sudan, in terms of regional peace. But I also see Kenya playing a very important role in the EAC economically and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area economically. That will be really the impetus that Kenya can give.
I think with that, unfortunately, we have to stop because we're already out of time. If you have any questions, you can, I'm sure His Excellency and his team will be around and you can get answers in person. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Ken.
Over to you, Zainab.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those candid views. I really appreciated the points you made. In fact, they seemed quite heartfelt about increasing productivity, jobs creation, investments in labor-intensive industries, and all of the headway you are making on that in that regard. Definitely, that's what Kenya needs. That is what a lot of African countries need, frankly, given that it's a continent in which we have 13 to 15 million people joining the labor market every year in need of jobs. You also emphasize the importance of accountable institutions, building institutions in order to ensure that we fight corruption in many African countries, that we ensure that the war on corruption goes beyond personalistic and individualistic sentiments. And finally, emphasizing the role of Kenya in East Africa, the fact that for Kenya to be able to continue playing that leadership role, it needs to be a strong democracy. So, these are the conversations that we are here to facilitate at the Carnegie Africa program, to ensure that, Africa's important countries, every country on the continent is important, but Africa's anchor countries have the opportunity, these platforms, to showcase the ideas that they have, initiatives, and to foster meaningful global partnerships that can help advance those initiatives that can bring prosperity and stability to the vast majority of Africans. So I would really like to thank you. I want to thank your delegation. I also want to thank, of course, Congresswoman Bass, who was able to join us, the president of Carnegie, Tino Kea, who joined us also, as well as, of course, Ken Opalo, who expertly steered the discussion today. Of course, thank you very much to all our guests here in person for joining us. The world is just reopening. Well, we're not out of the pandemic yet, but we're all trying to find our feet. Even our microphones are misbehaving, and they're not quite sure whether we are back to normal. Of course, thank you also to our online audience, people who joined us from around the US, from Kenya, from other African countries, from all over the world. Finally, I would like to thank our dynamic team at the Carnegie Endowment for making this event a success. A lot of work went behind the scenes. Notably, I would like to mention Juliet Ovadia, Alexander Chanaidi at the Africa Program, Catherine Buchanan, Cliff, Jaja Pranata, Nikita, Sahul, Sam, and Nina. Thank you very much for making this event a success. And then one final thing before we leave, do feel free to hang around. We have some refreshments. The Deputy President and his team are willing and really looking forward to engaging with you all. So have a lovely evening, ladies and gentlemen.